Rock and roll. Kia ora, Sarah. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Robert.
All right. Now, I was trying to figure out where to start this chat, and in the world of uh, healthcare and obesity and this multi-trillion dollar market that exists in this space, and you are now popping up with your eyes wide open to all of how these big worlds roll. Let's start here. What has been the biggest thing that surprised you the most the further you've got into this world of healthcare and mindset and body and weight and image and obesity and pharma and just business? What has surprised or shocked you the most that's opened your eyes up since you started this journey?
Yeah, it's a good question, Robert, and I think the one that has is the lack of understanding of obesity and overweight, and this is across both the medical field and just commonly. What I hear all the time, and you would have heard it, is just lack of willpower. And the more and more I've got into this area, it's nothing to do with that. Obesity is a complex disease. It's actually a chronic disease. It was actually made a chronic disease by the WHO, so the World Health Organization, in 2014, because it's a complex layer of genetics. About 50% is genetics, about 40% or probably 30% is physiology, and about 20% is environment. So if we dig into that, the really interesting thing about the human body, it's physiology. Our primal urge or our evolutionary trait to survive was to go out and eat food for times of famine. So you have this complex layer of hormones in your body, which is always defending your set weight, so the weight you are, because they want to store what you have in case of famine. And then when you actually lose weight, your hunger actually doubles over 16 weeks because that was urging us to go out and to hunt food. So it's not a lack of willpower. It's this complex relationship of hormones in your body, which we developed as an evolutionary or a survival mode. Otherwise, we'd all just lie in our caves, right? And if it was raining outside and go, oh, you know what? It's a bit cold. I'm not going to go outside. So that's the one, this education of it, and how much it's been stigmatized about lack of willpower without understanding this complex relationship of hormones in it.
I mean, you've cut to a pretty chunky issue because you're around the perception of what people have been told to what potentially it is, right? So in a world where the majority of people see it one way, how do you try to navigate the messaging or the narrative of the education around what you feel it actually is when so many people think it's one way but you feel it's the other? Like, that obviously builds some tension in terms of conversations or comms, right?
Look, I get it at me, all the time. You've got a diet pill and so on. And I'm saying, no, we're actually addressing the complex problem of obesity that we have in the developed world. It is the fourth key risk. It is the fourth mortality risk of mortality in the world. However, just going back to that, how do we do that education piece? In the last year and a half, 18 months, we've been, lucky is the wrong word, but the market has been educated for us, particularly in the largest market, the US. Novo Nordisk, which is a very large Danish pharmaceutical company, got approved by the FDA in 2021 a drug called Wegovy. And Wegovy, and it got approved for anti-obesity. Basically, with Wegovy, you inject yourself once a week with GLP-1, which GLP-1 is that hormone which goes to your brain and says, you're full, right? It happens naturally to you when you eat, right? About 45 minutes after a meal, you go, ooh, I'm quite full. I wish I hadn't eaten that much. Your lower intestine has actually released that hormone GLP-1 and a couple more to go to your brain and say, hey, little fella, stop eating. So, you've had enough. So this is this complex feedback. So they released this drug, and very cleverly, they educated the consumer before they educated the doctors, right? So they've just had this overwhelming response from consumers. What that is, we actually do that, but do it naturally. So you take this little pill, which is this extract, which is grown and discovered here in New Zealand. It goes down, it releases in your lower or upper digestive tract, and we naturally stimulate the release of GLP-1, CCK, and PYY to go up to your brain and say, hey, you're full.
Now, what's
So you're
PYY, sorry?
100%. Oh, it's a gastric hormone.
Okay.
There's three. So Novo Nordisk inject GLP-1. We stimulate it naturally. Just think of that. So they actually, it's really hard to educate, 300 million people, but they actually have done it for us. So what we are as a comparative to them is we are an effective and affordable natural alternative. So effective as in we stimulate the release of GLP-1 naturally, affordable because in America we're $60 a month. They are $1,400 a month.
Jeez.
And effective. So and affordable alternative. Let me just go into the effective. We've spent up to 25 million to date on our clinicals. So these are clinical trials. So this is not just me saying it. These are clinical trials that have been done in humans, males and females, in New Zealand. And these are clinical trials that have been published in journals, in global journals, which show our mechanism of action is to stimulate the release of these hormones, which reduce hunger. So in men and women, up to 80%. And reduce calorie intake. So we kind of say, and what we say, and I love this, we're modernizing human consumption naturally. So remember, you've got this primal urge in your brain to eat. That's telling you go out and you eat because you're going to do that for survival. What we're helping you with is to overcome that primal urge. So we're trying to modernize your brain to stay up with where you are in society now.
So I'm intrigued. Obviously, now you're sitting here running Calocurb. You've had previously Vitaco, Health3s, RD1. You've had quite the journey. I think you're even a Sloan Fellow, I think, as well from MIT. So you're not no dummy, and you obviously have dug into quite a lot of the research and insights and the data that sits within this. How have you navigated this mission mentally to take on literally a flipping $1 trillion industry with a small little product for New Zealand? Like, have you like kind of given yourself a bit of a thing of like, okay, this is the game plan, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to roll, let's go? Or is it like, hey, we're a bit more strategic with how we have to do this because we're literally, this small little fish in a big ocean? How do you think about the challenge of big markets with the leadership skills that you've, I guess, grown over these years?
Yeah, I think the important is you've got to be laser focused. And, it's one of our values is simplicity. We're simple and we've got to be simple, but laser focused in the markets we look at. And, America is the largest in the world. It is at the moment a $3 billion market in this. So let's just call it a drug. It's a semaglutide, right? Which has its brand name Wegovy and Saxenda and Ozempic and that, but it is a semaglutide. It is a $3 billion market and it's growing at 30% annually. So in the US, and Morgan Stanley has said it is like the statins in the 90s, and it will be 50 billion by 2030. So we're laser focused on that. And, I let me just go back to why did I do it? maybe I had, a bit of narcissism in here. But why did I do it? I was approached by plant and food research in 2017 to what would I do with this extract that they had spent the last 6.5 years developing or discovering and developing. And from my time at Healthery/Vitaco, uh, I had never seen an extract that had that amount of research in that bigger category where we could own the extract from source to shelf and from New Zealand. I mean, it blew me away, and it ticked the science boxes. I mean, it didn't. It was you were stimulating these hormones for your brain. This was completely new. And when I say completely new, we've just received our US patent. Now, to get a patent, you actually have to have something that is completely novel. So, this is 6 years later when we first applied for it in 2000, when PFR applied for it in 2016, we've received it. So they approached me. I said, wow, I've never seen something like this. I want to do this. And then that's really where it started. So, yeah, it's been a journey. It's been 4 years. Uh, and, I've learned a huge amount along the way.
So, Sarah, you talk about this 4 years, this journey. How would you describe the 4 years if it was a tweet on Twitter? What would that tweet read about the journey to date so far in the last 4 years of this next chapter in your life?
Roller coaster.
That's every startup. That's it. That's everywhere. That's every startup. Now I'll ask this: when you go through, the Frontieras of the world, the RD1s, the Vitacos, the Healtheries, all these other things, and then you compare that essentially like this kind of corporate predictable life, 9 to 5, smash your thing, yada, yada, yada. You compare that to startup world, and obviously, most people will go startups or whatever, and then they go into other stuff. Not too many people go full corporate and then come to the startup side. What would you feel is the biggest difference between startup life and corporate life?
I think it's taught me, I say to me versus everyone else, it's taught me huge humility. I've loved every one of my businesses, and I call them my businesses, they're our businesses, and I've loved our teams with it. We've had a ball. I think back on the different companies and the teams that I've worked with, I've loved it and loved the people, and we've had some real successes. But what it is, it's a team. You have a large team behind you, and you have a large business behind you, and you have a platform. There's a real perhaps an ability to, or a way to think, hey, I'm pretty good. These things are happening, and we've had this great success, and look at me, aren't I great? When you go and you actually found a company, and you do it from the start by yourself, and you're out there every day, boy, I tell you what, you have to reach down. It's taught me humility,
Now,
huge humility.
is that because the inconsistencies and the constant unknown of what when it's all on your shoulders and the growth phase is so disproportionately higher than the safety and security of corporate life?
I think with all companies, I always take them as my own. I've never said, oh, well, it's not my own, and the brand is not my own, and I've had huge amount of time. But yeah, it is. You are, the one paper hanger, as everyone always says. You are, and I think you have to be so passionate about it. You have to be. You're almost maniacal, I'd say, in your desire to make it work. It's yeah, and I think just about every startup would say that. But when you've been going on, it is you are so passionate about this that you're always looking for what is that opportunity, what am I going to do next, and those highs. When you have the highs, for example, Robert, on the 1st of January this year, in America, we got a huge article on Calocurb in the Daily Mail. Now, the Daily Mail is the 10th most read newspaper in the world, 150 million in America. Can you imagine that day? You
Yeah.
know, it's like a drug. You just want more of it. It's amazing. The sales, we did $250,000 in that day. I mean, that is just, you know, unbelievable. So those massive highs, what are the massive lows? Oh, you've got them, you turn down for something, someone doesn't like you, you don't get a regulatory. We spent 2.5 years for regulatory approval into Malaysia, and we couldn't get it in the end. And it wasn't because of our science, our claims, anything. It was because our delayed release cap is not registered yet in Malaysia. It can be as tiny as that, and that's 2.5 years. So yeah, those are the day to day. But would I give it up? No, no,
So
just the learning.
do you feel that you've learnt more in the startup in 4 years than you would have 4 years doing corporate stuff?
Oh well, that's interesting. I think the corporate background. Well, let me go right back to the beginning. That's probably easier. Originally, Robert, I actually graduated as a
Yeah,
veterinarian,
Wellington Zoo, right?
and no, I didn't graduate at
No,
Wellington
but
Zoo, but I
yeah,
was
sorry.
at Wellington.
Well, you worked there at Kelly Tarleton's.
Yeah,
Yeah, not
yeah.
at
So I
Wellington Zoo.
graduated. I graduated as a veterinarian and practiced for about 5 years, but always managed to get into exotic animals. I'm not quite sure why. So I did did the animals at the Wellington Zoo, and then when I came to Auckland, I did Kelly Tarleton's. But I started to specialise in aquaculture, and then started to go more and more into animal nutrition and so on like that. So that's sort of the background. So, it wasn't always in corporate life or probably the standard commercial or commerce degrees that go into that. So, I probably always take a different aspect to it. So, I think all of my learning up to this date has certainly assisted me. But what this journey with Calocurb has done, it has put me into the whole digital world, the direct to consumer. And that has been, that has been exciting. That is something that, probably at my age and stage, I wouldn't have, even though I couldn't get my microphone working before, I wouldn't have had that experience. And, as someone that loves that consumer behavior, the ability with digital to be able to talk directly to millions of people and understand those demographics is just fantastic. So powerful.
So there's a bunch I wanted to unpack, and then maybe I'll start off with the whole business models of, I guess, how things were done in a B2B environment, wholesale, retail, and now, exactly as you say, this D2C, direct to consumer play where, through an online platform, you can get to the customer and the consumer directly. You can own that relationship. You can own the data. You can own the conversation. You can own the relationship in terms of communications and marketing and subscriptions and whatever it may be direct to them. How has your brain, I guess, opened up and expanded to see the actual possibilities of what, I guess, modern business leveraging technology can actually look like and be like?
Yeah, look, even I think you said, you went to MIT and you went to, you did to Sloan, and I did a fellowship. That was 11 years ago. And even then, that D2C world was, somewhere like MIT where entrepreneurial is just the second word used the whole time. Even then, it was very, very young. So along the way, it's just been a learning journey. It just is, the platforms, how you talk to them, the apps you use, the metrics you look at. And every day I would read probably 4 to 5, you know, D2C daily updates, and they'll be talking about Shopify's upgrades. They'll be talking about Klaviyo. They'll be talking about all of these I don't want to throw these words out, but yeah, that's been that learning journey along the way. But I think you always have to pull back as well and say, these are consumers. They're not actually consumers, they're people. And who are the people and what are we saying to them and how do they want to be talked to? But, so much more exciting than that, wholesale retail, you can actually talk to them almost on an individual level.
So to that, right? You saying 11 years ago at Sloan MIT, focusing on, did a bunch on this consumer behavior side. In the last 11 years, what have you seen be the biggest, I guess, shift in the way, consumer behavior has actually changed through technology or social media or whatever it may be, or instinctually, whatever. What are your insights on on how you've seen the game shift over the last decade?
Look, of course, it's our use of technology. It's our ability to get information. It's our ability to search things. We used to call it, people would search things and they would look at the newspaper and it was where they were on their buying journey. That just happens so much faster now and what people can search for. Interesting, Robert, 20 years ago, God, it was 20 years ago, I actually did the advanced management program at Harvard. And
Of course you did. Of course you did.
which was unbelievable. But you know what they did then, and that was 20 years. Well, they taught us how to use this thing called Google. And we
Oh,
were like,
jeez.
ooh, and that was 20 years ago. So I just think, I've lived through this most extraordinary, exciting time where all of these things have evolved. And by founding Calocurb, I've been able to be a part of it. But yeah, we were given at Harvard a Palm Pilot that you could use, which actually meant, that you could sort of get these funny looking emails sometimes. That was 20 years ago. So, just where we've come from, and this rapid change, and consumers have come with it. Obviously, COVID and the pandemic accelerated this massively with, people looking online, buying online, you know, uh, trusting online a lot more. Accelerated that. But there's always going to be this mix. I talk about this primal urge of people to eat. There's a primal urge for people to go out and socialize and to go and feel and touch things as well. So it's not one or the other. It's a balancing act in it. How you give information, how you think about it. So, yeah, I'm thinking about it all the time, and and just all of these new things that are happening.
If you just join us, Sarah Kennedy's joining us on the show today, CEO of Calocurb. We're trying to make the big push into the USA on Today FM with Robett Live. Hey, so I'm interested to ask Sarah. You talked about Harvard before. You obviously done the MIT thing. Clearly, have you always found yourself as a self-identified tall poppy? Have you felt like you're an outlier? You've been a bit different. You've been on your own program. What's your journey been like? I guess at the top of excelling with what you've done and how you've done it. What's that journey been like? Because obviously, not too many people have done what you've done.
No, I've never felt like a tall poppy. I suppose, I've what was I going to say? I've always loved learning, not just for being a geek. I've always loved it and what it gives and the challenges with it. So I've always felt that I've been very lucky with that, and had some tremendous opportunities, and I think had some great people around me, who have complimented me, and the things that I'm not good at. I've been highly complimented about. I think as I grow older, I would hope that I listen a lot more. I think when you're younger, you want to be able to know everything, and you don't want to be caught up by not knowing it. I wish I knew now what I do when I was younger, because I would have listened I still don't listen a lot, but listen a lot more and take, more, some more, valuable advice from people. But yeah, no, it's been extraordinary. And to sort of, I hate to say the word end, but to finish off or to round it off with this company, I think has been, it's you don't often get an opportunity to found a company, right down to its name, its design, its strategy, where it goes. And I think, and when someone says to me, you get this real kick out when someone says to you, "Oh, Calocurb, yeah, I've heard about it," or "My friend's using it. Oh my God, it's amazing," or something like that.
So I was just thinking about, when you're listening more, I guess when you're older and when you're young, you just want to try and, swing for the fences and go hard with all of it. One of the things I've been thinking about with the democratization and the availability and access to data and information is this idea around information versus intel, right? Info versus intel, where now if it's kind of flat, where everyone can get the same data from pretty much anything, they can, all the stuff's out there if they just, ask Google, ask Siri, or whatever it may be. The point of difference with so much of it is the curation of that data to know the right questions, or the intelligence, the intel to know what it can go where, to actually give a better insight, which is actually where the value is. Do you feel that constant case of like learning and insights and being able to, I guess, learn across so many different like ecosystems and industries, that curiosity gives you way more, I guess, intel or insights to actually make your business better? Like, how do you navigate, I guess, what you consume into how you implement it and the filter to do it to make the business better?
Yeah, I like what you said, the curation of information. And there's been this huge, massive at the moment with artificial intelligence and chat GDT and what that will do for copywriting and that. And I think to your point, it is curation of information. You can take a lot of information and you have to look at it and try and put it in a situational, if that makes sense. Try to, to say, how does this look to my situation? If you just take it and use it, it's like an example, I mean, you would have done hundreds as well. If I ever do a speech and it's been written by a speechwriter, it's appalling. It is absolutely appalling. It's the ones where I've just fallen so flat on my face because I've taken something and then read it and it's not me. So I kind of think about information a bit like that. You can take someone that someone's written for you, but you have to be able to customize it or, to your words, curate it to what you're doing. I also think I loved the words once, this childlike wonder of the world, to be able to look at all of these things and take this childlike wonder instead of saying, it scares me, to be able to say, oh, how can I use that? Oh, isn't that interesting? Wow, look at that. Yeah, so I think of information like that. And, massive information has always been available. Uh, it's just as, and it's the same as it always was, whether we had it in books or newspapers or singing songs or music, it's the same. It's just how you get the information and how you process it.
Well, it's that point too when I think you're constantly curious, that drive for more like data and info, or even looking through multiple industries to get little kernels and threads of insights or intel which you can kind of bring into your world. I think that curation is going to be the superpower, because in my thing, when anyone can ask Siri or Google or ChatGPT or AI or whatever it may be for the data, and if everyone's got the same thing, what's the actual point of difference, or what's the competitive advantage? When everyone's got access to the same stuff, it's the creativity, it's the storytelling, it's the narrative, it's the curation of it, it's the packaging to create your own niche, it's the strategy, it's just it's all that other stuff, and so in many ways it's kind of like soft skills are going to be the new hard skills, to actually be able to navigate the best way forward with all the info that you've got. And I think, pro to your point, when you're constantly curious, you're probably a bit more self-aware than others. So maybe it's a better way to actually get more insights and intel to actually make a better business, which can eventually end up being a pretty good superpower, right?
Yeah, I like what you say with that. You can equate it to really good things. Everyone's had access to language, but not everyone was a Shakespeare. Everyone has access to paints and oil paints, but not everyone's a Picasso. And so everyone has access to information, but it doesn't mean they're going to be able to put something together. I think the other thing with technology, though, which has made it so different in this time around, is that we really have almost a virtual company. Now, that wouldn't have been possible 10 or even 15 years ago. So when I say a virtual company, our extract is grown in Motueka in the South Island. It's a specific variety of hops which is extracted there. So that's grown by some incredible farmers down there. Just on that, I can see you smiling. You can't see me, we can see me smiling, and the fact that guys actually really do like Calocurb, because if they get a slight burp or reflux after the pill, it's like a beer burp. So, guys quite like that. But it's growing there. It's then taken to the US to a very large manufacturing. There's only 2 places we can manufacture in the world, and it's manufactured into these patented capsules. From there, it goes to a third-party from there it goes to another factory where it's bottled and labelled. And from there it goes to either back to New Zealand, or it'll go into Australia, or it'll go into a 3PL in Florida.
Wow.
And then from there...
Where's the production in the States? Where's the
That's in South Carolina.
Okay.
And then the bottling and labelling is in Miami. And then the 3PL is, well, you'll have different 3PLs. I'll bottle and label in Australia because I need it for regulatory purposes. And then I'll have a 3PL there. But you remember, I don't have to own all of these assets. And then I have our agency. I have PR in the US. I have PR here in New Zealand. I have digital agencies in the US, Australia, and here. So, by technology, we can be talking all the time, moving these around and doing that. It's no longer you have to have these layers upon layers of assets that, you can use this, and it can make you, and I hate the word nimble, but it does make you very nimble because you can change your messaging and change what you're doing by using this. You just got to stay up a bit later at night, or get up a bit earlier in the morning for time zones.
Well, I was just actually going to ask that around time. When you've got one business that's essentially a global company across different time zones, multiple continents, how do you currently navigate your time at the moment to make sure that you're on top of things? How do you currently do it?
Well, I think you work in the time zones. I always find working with America easier because, they're really 5 to 6 hours ahead of us, a day behind. That's how I look at it. So, I find Europe a bit harder, but we usually do it. So I'm a night owl. So if I'm talking to them, I'll be talking to them at 8 or 9 at night. It's 8 or 9 in their morning. So I quite enjoy that. So, you just got to work. China is, I lived in China for over a year. I lived in Beijing, and they are, let me have a look. I think they are 5 hours. Yeah, they're 5 hours ahead of us as well on the same day. So you kind of get these little things in your brain where you know when it's good to talk to them or not. But, running this virtual business, so, we bring in our science is done in conjunction with plant and food research, who've just been amazing to work with. So we've got these fantastic scientists, and our chief scientist there, Dr. Edward Walker. So yeah, this sort of it's amazing.
I'm interested in your journey to the top in many respects. It's pretty interesting. You've, after these years, gone from corporate world to startup world. It obviously feels awesome that you can own it, control it, craft it end to end, have the strategy, the whole vision that you can kind of see out the whole process. On your, I guess, journey the way to the top, Did you feel any like resentment or tension, or I guess deal with much bullshit? The fact that you were such a, I guess, powerful, strong female leader that's running the boardroom and running these bigger companies. What was that? What was that journey like in comparison to others that have potentially gone through it?
Uh, look, I think sometimes, Robert, I'm blind to it. I possibly, I think it also helps that I'm probably 5'11", so I kind of stride through. Uh, and going through veterinarian is very egalitarian. And the fact, an animal never looks at you if you're a male or a female, and it's never about strength because it's not about strength, it's about technique. And so I think that gave me a very good grounding, males and females, other than your listeners probably won't, but I always remember it in our at veterinary school. We were all standing around doing a castration on a horse, which is what they call a standing castration. And so all the girls were around, and I just noticed in the group that all the guys melted back and weren't anywhere to be seen, and it was a woman standing in it. But when I went through, it was 50-50 in the class. So I suppose I kind of had that background. And as I got more and more into business, maybe I should have felt it, but I never did. Uh, I think it was always, I enjoyed what I was doing and creating great teams around me. And also, as I said, it's not me; it's the people around me. It's the team that make it. So celebrating that with the people.
Well, I think when you're not necessarily blinded to it, but when you're focused and you've got this single kind of laser approach to what you're after and what you're there to do, that sort of radiates through an organization from the top down, right? So it's like, hey, we're building this pocket, that's what we're doing, and that momentum becomes contagious. So instead of potentially being aware of the dynamics and stuff around, it was like, here's the mission, here's the goal, here we at team, let's flip and go. And so it became potentially around more momentum than optics, which is actually quite a powerful position to be in, right? Because then it's also shown that you're onto the next to help grow this thing, and you're not really pissing around with what's in the way in the middle that others may stress about.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. I think it was that energy. I always think, and I don't know why, it's never enough. It's just constantly, sometimes I'd just like to turn my brain off and stop. I just like, no, but it's just this constant, I want it to. And, my mother said it was I was like that as a child. And I remember her saying she went to see my, would have been standard four teacher. And he said to her, he was smoking and my mother was smoking and they were puffing away. And he said, she never stops talking. She never stops talking and asking questions. And mum said, I know. It drives us mad as well. I know. So, I think it's that endless what, I don't know. It's just, I want it. And I don't even know why I want it because, you get one thing and then it's like you want the next. And it's just that it's just such personal satisfaction, I suppose. And then the great people I work with.
Well, momentum is, infectious and contagious. People want to be a part of it. I'm probably similar in ways where if I'm not creating or going or doing or building or something, I feel like I'm, this Ferrari in a garage that's just not been put to use, and I'm doing myself a disservice by not utilizing the skill set or capabilities or the gifts which I've been given, right? And so in many ways it's the same thing where, because you want to see like what else can we explore, what else can we push, what would this look like if it happened, kind of turn those things. For me, is that I love the concept of when you can turn this idea or something that you think about into reality, and you watch the byproduct of it be, jobs or businesses or fun or experiences or whatever it may be to sort of go around. I was going to ask, obviously the journey that you've been on, Sarah, was, if you were talking to your 10-year-old self and you're like, hey, Sarah, this is what your life's going to end up like, and this is the path that you're going to be on, would you have believed it? Because at 10-year-old, you were already kind of like on a mission that were curious. Would you be surprised? What would you have, not necessarily told yourself, but would you have believed what you've done at that age? How is your headspace to see where the future could go?
Yeah, it's a good point. Would have I believed it? I probably would have been delighted. I don't, I think, is it with all driven people, you never really believe in yourself that much. So you're always striving for that next thing. I think you're never complacent. So you're always striving. So I probably would have been delighted, uh, and with that, but I don't think it would have made any difference. I still would have done, and what have I changed my careers? What have I not done veterinary? What have I done? All of those things have formed these wonderful layers or fabrics around. I often laugh with veterinary because, should have I done commerce or law or anything like that? I often think of it, because so much well, it gives me the science background, but so much of our behavior is very animal orientated. So I always laugh, in a boardroom when I think, people go around marking the table or whittling in corners and things like that. It's animal behavior. And that I think allows you to reflect sometimes on what's happening.
So to that point, as in the world of being a vet and seeing behaviour, and obviously from the consumer human behaviour on that side, what is the single biggest trait that you bring across from being a vet and watching how animals behave to humans that most humans wouldn't actually realise is a thing?
I'd hope compassion, and the fact that, humans, have learned to cover up fear and anxiety and discomfort, by many different things, where animals, as you know, are far more open. Well, they're not. It's interesting. People would say to me, how can you diagnose an animal on a table? And as I say to an animal, never lies to you. You can do it by, they never ever, they don't come into your office and go, oh no, I have one drink a day or I have one drink a week. Well, they're down 2 bottles a night. They don't. An animal, you can tell by their touch, the feel, the smell, everything. They're far easier but humans have learned to, uh, only one time, well, actually many times, but one time I missed it. A dog came in and he had an upset stomach. And anyway, we went through a number of things and we finally found that he'd eaten a pair of underpants. And because you can't palpate it, and because it just feels soft and you can't see it through an x-ray. And uh, anyway, I finally said this after we'd done an exploratory laparotomy to the owner. And the owner said to me, you never asked me if he ate underpants. And it's like, yep, I didn't, But, so that I think would be is compassion. And we as humans layer that a lot. So just try and sometimes understand what people's motives are and maybe dig a little bit deeper sometimes into it and it and it may be uncover something.
Very, very good. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Sarah, having a good little chat through. Best of luck with the journey ahead. I know you're going through, the big race, trying to hit the States and so much more. And it's cool to giving Motueka a little shout out for doing the stuff there, which is cool too. So best luck with
Oh
the
yeah,
journey.
great
Really
farmers,
appreciate
great
it.
farmers. Yeah, and
I,
Robert, they're great. And you said, you're a Ferrari in a garage. I'd like to say that, but I think I'm sort of an older Model T or something like that. I take a lot more repairs and maintenance to get me out of the garage. But when I go, I'm lovely. But yeah, you stay with the Ferrari.
I really appreciate it. Thanks so much, Sarah. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
See ya.